worried that you might be the cool kid? You wear the latest fashions on top of all the trends. Or have you ever worried you were too much in the mainstream? Always so generic, more normal than your friends. Well, we've devised a test to put to rest your fears. There's no need to panic if you lend us your ears. Tonight you can't sleep easy after all that you've heard. Cause if you like the show, then you're probably a nerd. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all. Tyler, Phil, and Boris. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all in Canon.
It's Sunday. You know what that means. It's time for a new episode of the It's Canon podcast. The podcast where we talk about all things pop culture. The podcast where we talk about all things movies, all things comic books, all things video games, all things books, all things everything. Because it's all in canon. We're your hosts. I'm Boris. And as always, I'm joined by Phil.
Hello, all you people. And Boris.
Yes. Hello, Phil. How's everything?
I'm doing wonderful. The weather's turning. I'm happy to have it not be minus 10, minus 20. All of these nice cold temperatures. I'm happy to have the warm weather here.
Yep.
Warmer.
Agreed with you. So, we have quite a show for everyone. We have a show where we will be talking about our lives, because apparently people want to hear about those. I don't want to hear about my own life, but you, the listeners, ask, so the listeners will get. We're also going to be talking about Nintendo in the marketplace. We're going to be talking about rumored devices, the differentiators, why Nintendo is so different from Microsoft and Sony. We're going to be talking about privacy because the cloud is becoming a bit of a concern, as are foreign countries. We're going to be talking about HBO's and Warner Brothers and DC Comics parent company getting in trouble by the SEC. And if there's time, we're going to be talking about Disneyland and California reopenings. But we'll see how we do on time.
Yeah.
What a week. What a week.
What a week.
What a week. What a week. It's been something. So, yeah. I don't know where to start. It's funny because,
well, you know,
one of the things that I was doing a guest spot yesterday on another podcast, talking wrestling and all that fun stuff. And they were asking me about like my podcast, like the wrestling one. And I record it the exact same way that I record this podcast. One take, one or two takes. If we screw up or whatever, you know, I'll rewind, I'll stop, rewind, make the live cut, and then we continue. The hosts of that podcast thought I was insane for doing it like that. And then they asked, how do I pipe in the music? And I'm like, it's all live, everything. Like, you hear what we hear. So that's why, like, sometimes you'll hear one of us talk or cough or something during the intro and the outro. This is why, like, I'm very careful about the intro and the outro as well, because I cannot touch. Yeah, so apparently we're insane for the way that we record.
oh, it lends to authenticity, right? At least for me. And that's the feedback that I get from people who listen, that they go, it's like actually sitting with us and having the same chats. Like it's just structured that we're on topics and we're getting to certain destinations with what it is that we want to express. But overall, like, I think it's just, you know, a great way to have an inviting conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's just kind of funny that was kind of the feedback that I got from them. I was like, you're insane. Not in a bad way, but, you know, I think that kind of raised the appreciation they have for that show more, knowing that it's all done on the cuff, knowing that, you know, it's all one take, 2, 3 maximum. And it's also, the other thing is that the wrestling show I record Wednesday night. Typically, we don't start until 12:30 Thursday morning. So, you know, we're recording for an hour and a half. I keep that show 90 minutes max. Like, you know, Here's the thing about the wrestling show. The show that we review is in 2 hours. If my show is as long or longer than the show I review, that's an issue. So, we're typically 90 minutes. And then I do the minor tweaking that I do. So I do sound normalization, which basically means that, it levels things off, for lack of a better term. And then I deliver it to the owner, and we kind of take it from there. But so I think that's the other thing. I'm not going to be sitting around until 3, 4 in the morning, recording, editing, getting something ready for a 7 a.m. delivery. So yeah.
But it's kind of funny because when we did our Mandalorian shows, we definitely exceeded the show runtime with our episodes.
I know.
That's what I started laughing about, because I'm like, I remember you making comments like.
I always made those comments even as we recorded the shows. It's like, it's amazing that Here we are, 90 minutes in a conversation of an hour-long show max.
Yeah. I'm like, a lot of those shows ended up being a lot shorter. And even with WandaVision, I know we're going to talk about that later in the week, because it finished its season off this week, and probably the whole series, apparently.
Yep.
Their showtimes were rather deceiving because they had the 2 sets of credits, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like, I feel like we're hitting the end of this show and it looks to be about in the middle. It's like,
exactly.
It was just funny with how many things happened in that show with the commercials and other things that, I don't know. I guess people think that it's sometimes filler, but it's not. It was a lot of great fun, in my opinion.
Exactly. So you did bring it up. I'll talk about it later, but I'll announce it now. We will have a special midweek. We're back to 2 episodes a week, as much as we can, as long as there's something to talk about. So this week we will have a WandaVision recap review analysis with some very special guests. You may remember them from the Mandalorian episode. And it's Brad and Lisa from Comic Book Couples Counseling. Who better to bring on, right?
Oh yeah, first off, that podcast that we had them on for the episode of The Mandalorian there was my first time really interacting with them, and I thought to myself in the back of my head, we need to find ways to work with these people, either have them on our show or do something that crosses over with them more frequently, because they are just amazing people who are very well read, especially about comic books. But their concept for their podcast is fantastic. I do recommend you go check it out. They're just a delight, and I think that they're going to have some takes on WandaVision that will expand our appreciation, just like they did on The Mandalorian. Having them on that show, I think that was my least favorite episode to watch, and it ended up being one of my favorite episodes just because of their contribution.
Yeah, exactly. And so we haven't really talked about the details, but I have some notes, some high-level notes written, and I think it's going to be a great episode. We're going to get really in-depth into kind of the thinking, into the relationship between Wanda and Vision. We're going to be talking about the relationship between Wanda and her parents, her brother, basically everyone in her life. We're going to be analyzing the shit out of that show, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So come prepared, Phil.
Oh, I will. I might have to do a quick little rewatch of key episodes.
Yep.
Again, but I'm going to be as unscripted and fanboy as possible with this, because there's no way I'm going to be able to match your nerd or their nerd levels on Vision and Wanda. But I have been reading the comic book from I guess 2015, that Vision run. And yeah, I'm enjoying my time getting to know these characters, because one thing that somebody brought forward to me, or to discussions that I've seen, is that I guess it was one of the actors, Paul Bettany, was mentioning it, or somebody was in the Marvelverse, that you actually get to focus in on these characters. That was the dude on Hot Ones this week, the guy who plays Falcon. the guy who's in everything.
Anthony Mackie.
Anthony Mackie. He brought up the fact that we wouldn't get to know all this great stuff about Wanda or Vision if it wasn't for the show. And that's where these shows really give you access to secondary and tertiary characters and really expands them. And it was already tragic what happened in Endgame and Infinity War and things like that between Wanda and Vision. And this show just gives you that next level access to those characters that just get so limited screen time when they're together with the ensemble of the Avengers.
Yep. And we're going to talk about the comics a little bit, kind of the similarities and differences between the Tom King run in 2015. We're going to be talking about the West Coast Avengers. We're going to be talking about the pricing of the West Coast Avenger issues because they have just skyrocketed on the fact that some aspects of the show were based on some of those issues. But that's for Tuesday. Yeah. So, Phil, I feel really awake today. It's crazy.
Well, I like this non-hungover time that we have the past couple of weeks.
Oh, I haven't been hungover. I've just not been. I've been exhausted, not sleeping. The past couple nights, I've actually been sleeping better. Waking up my usual time, but just sleeping a little more. So I've been feeling a lot better. I haven't had a good hangover for like a good month and a half, probably longer. Good. Yeah. No, I just find that sometimes we have low energy at 1 o'clock, but really we're clear. Everybody's doing well. But yeah, I'm glad that you're getting the sleep that you need because that was obviously concerning because we've been talking about it offline. Yeah, it's been blowing my mind, but I'm well rested. I love weekends because I get to just relax and take it easy and get some sleep in and get some TV time in. Well, basically all week I've been doing TV time. Oh. Yeah. Oh. I know. It's been crazy. Even me this week, as busy as I've been, I think just because I've been so busy and I have nothing else to do, I always have something on the background. How much I pay attention to it, that's a different story. But I haven't not known what's going on, right? If we had to talk about something on the podcast, I wouldn't be able to. So, that's kind of like the level of attention that I give things. Can I talk about it on the podcast or not? Yeah. Yeah. Increasingly, I have to pay closer and closer attention to some things because we discuss them here. And sometimes it makes me give certain shows or movies a chance that maybe I'd kind of blow off. Yeah. Just because I've heard you guys reference it or I want to know more about it. And there might be something that I find repellent about it, but then it gets good. Oh, and this week, get this, right? I entered this Instagram contest for Beat You. Hold on. Is this the story that I stopped you earlier? Yeah. We were gonna do this off air, but we're gonna do it on air. So Beichi Kimchi. I'll get the name straight because they're really nice people. I entered this contest for kimchi, and they informed me that I had won. So they were like, "Yeah, Beichu Baechu Kimchi." So they're a Canadian company. Their stuff's really good. A friend of mine tipped me off to it, and we just started co-ordering it. Just because you need to have a minimum $60 purchase to get the free shipping. So, and that's like 4 jars of kimchi, which is a lot of kimchi. And I won this contest, and the nice lady there wants me to taste test the 3 different kimchis that she sent. And it's like a regular, an extra spicy, and a vegan. Because I guess there's like fish sauce in the other 2, and they have a vegan option. So, lo and behold, because I was in desperate need of my kimchi and wasn't sure when the free stuff was shipping, so I ordered some more. And she's like, I'm going to combine the orders. So I got 7 jars of kimchi. All right. This is like, now I'm treating it like weapons grade plutonium because it's so tasty. It's so addictive. It's net carb neutral. Like it's 1 gram of carb, 1 gram of fiber. So it zeroes out for anybody counting carbs for snacks and things like this.
It's very, very great tasting. If you've had kimchi before, you haven't, give it a try because it's amazing. But I'm telling you, I'm walking around like a hot air balloon. I'm just like, the amount of gas that I can process now is off the chart, man. It is a farty party. I can tell you that.
Hilarious.
It's not a good time that way. Well, it is, I guess, because it does promote good gut health.
Yeah.
So I've given this thing a playground to work with. It's doing its job.
Amazing.
So good on them. It's awesome
Classic.
stuff, though.
That's a classic Phil story if I ever heard of one.
Oh, well, a classic Phil story would be the way that I cleared a room or something like that after eating it. But
yeah, or the way that we destroyed the hotel room for a poor ex-wife.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah. I'll never forget when I was a kid. I went on a trip. You know how in school you'd go on trips in grade 7 and grade 8, and they get increasingly farther and farther from home?
Yep.
And I'll never forget, and I think it was grade 8, we went to Quebec City. And, there's 3 or 4 guys rooming up in each hotel room, and it's an inevitable den of shenanigans that's happening in any of these rooms. Like, it's total chaos for the teachers. We were probably just in their room drinking. And we had Doritos and those water guns that were motorized. Like, they were new at the time, and you could put batteries in them, and they'd shoot like a ton of water.
Yeah.
And just be like, they look like machine guns. And the teacher came in because he knew something was going on, and he walks in, and there's just stench of Doritos and farts was enough to make him walk out. And I'm thinking that room is unusable now. Like, they'll never get that smell out. I'm sure if you went in there today, you'd still be like, is there Doritos hidden in here?
This reminds me of the BO episode of Seinfeld. The car?
Yeah. Just sticks with it. Yeah, kids do dirty things.
Yep, they do. So,
but yeah.
What else is going on, Phil? Well, how's the week been? We've spoken here and there, but yeah.
I'm watching the regular stuff like WandaVision, Resident Alien. I had some laugh out loud moments this week again. Alan Tudyk just does awkward so well in that show. Snowpiercer, obviously big episode this week for me.
Great episode.
I was blown away by that whole experience and on the edge of my seat for either tension or grossness. If
you make a show that only has Melanie slowly going insane, I would watch it 100%.
Yep. She did just such she knocked it out of the park this episode.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard too because she's, because of the show, she's not as prevalent right now just because of her character choices. So I was really thankful to get back to her because I felt the need to catch up with what was going on because that was definitely an angle for the show creators.
I gotta ask you,
WandaVision.
The whole previous to this episode, like last week, to be honest, this week's episode or last week's episode, however you want to say it, I didn't watch on Monday night. Even though I was up, I didn't watch it. I didn't feel the need to. I didn't feel like I should. I didn't get the hook from the previous few episodes.
Yeah.
So it's funny because this seems to be the feedback that I'm getting from a lot of people where, they were kind of starting to cool off on the show, but then this week just hooked everyone right back up.
Yeah, the show for the past, not this past week, but the 2 episodes before that have slowly been unraveling for me in terms of the hook. You're right. I'm interested, but I'm not, feeling like, oh, today's Snowpiercer day. Got to find it. It's just like I'll be blasting around. And I've been watching it out of habit more than anything else, but I haven't found them very compelling. This week, I was glued to the TV. I was like, the tension, everything. It was just so well done. I enjoyed it an immense amount. And yeah, not just because, I have that childhood crush on Jennifer Connelly. It's just the virtue of the fact that I just think that she does a great job in this role. So I find it very interesting. And WandaVision, which we're going to talk about later on, Muppet Show. But I did pick up 2 movies that I was a little bit surprised with. Mortal Engines on Netflix didn't suck.
Yeah.
Wasn't the greatest movie, but like, if I'm gonna believe that there's a train circling the world, right, and during a man-made Armageddon, environmental Armageddon, then I'm gonna have to accept that cities can drive around like tractors.
Yep. I know, right?
And then the internal politics and struggle there within. But once you suspend enough reality, the show was actually all right. I enjoyed it. You know, it's kind of cheesiness, but it was fun. The other one that I kind of wanted to watch, and I finally gave in last night, and I bought it. Yes, I did buy it, because I just can't be arsed to go and try to find it anywhere else, even though I know now that I bought it, it's probably going to be on Netflix next week. But that would be Monster Hunter.
Yep. I've heard
I was curious.
very bad things about this movie. What did you think?
I didn't hate it.
Oh.
It there was parts of it that I thought went way too deep into it. Like the spider issue that they have in this world is definitely a big problem. I don't know why they haven't solved that. But overall, I was waiting for it to really take a turn to shit. But it ended up being about on par with most video game movies, which isn't saying that it's great. I'm not recommending the movie. I'm just saying that it was about on par with Resident Evil. You know, it felt like, because it's Mila. It's Mila, you know, like, I'm just like, it just felt like that character, right? And
Right.
It was watchable. I would like to know more about the world. I would like to cinematically explore it a little more. There was things about it that were weird, but again, if I'm going to believe a city can drive around like a tractor or a tank, then I'm going to have to believe that ships can sail on sand and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's some fantasy aspects to it. It's from the video game. The talking cat thing was awesome for me, but
Yeah.
it's a bit of a hook. Ron Perlman did a great job as well.
Amazing.
So, yeah, there's choices made for sure. I can see people not enjoying it, but I think that it's awfully tough whenever you try to tackle one of these huge video game entities. They have a cult following, and I don't think you're going to please those fans, and I don't think you're going to get casual fans. So it very much could be seen to me as missing a huge mark. But
yeah,
it was fun for a casual person who plays that shit. I'm like, hey, it was good. What'd you get up to?
So last week, I finished watching that Guinea and Georgia show on Netflix. It was pretty good. Exactly what I thought. It's like Gilmore Girls meets Pretty Little Liars meets Degrassi meets, I don't know, something violent. It's weird. It's right up my alley.
Yeah, teen drama.
It's more than teen drama, but yeah, teen drama. Team angst at its maximum, to say the least. So finished watching that. I also watched all 3 seasons of a Canadian show called Slasher on Netflix. Pretty good. Every season is a different kind of whodunit. What's cool about the show is that there's a lot of Canadian actors, some acquaintances that I recognize, so that was kind of cool. And the other thing that's cool about that is watching people who were on Degrassi getting murdered or something like that. So it's like, so that was that. And then I started watching a French murder mystery whodunit called Black Spot. It's really good, actually. It's kind of like a more serious Twin Peaks. It's so far so good. I'm still only on the first season, but you know, all things point to it being good. So, you know, that's that. But yeah, I've been super busy with work, like very little downtime this week. Actually, I podcasted quite a bit more than I wanted to. We Monday night we did the interview with Carl which again I want to thank Carl. That was a really fun time. Yeah, so we did that on Monday. Then on Tuesday, I had another interview with somebody, and that show is gonna probably come on, and not this Wednesday, but next. We talk about kind of like, financial freedom, Generation Z, millennials, and kind of how we approach life so different, but at the same time respecting that some people just like the 9 to 5 grind, but kind of how these new generations are changing the way the workforce works. So very different type of interview, but it's something that I know that some people are gonna like. So let's try it out and we'll gauge, right? That's what we're trying. Yep. We're trying new things on the show now. So I did that on Tuesday. Then Wednesday I did my usual wrestling stuff. And then Thursday, Friday, I was super busy with work, and then that leads us into Saturday. And Saturday, I just did nothing. Didn't really watch much either. I was watching reruns and rewatches of How I Met Your Mother.
Always a good one. Hey, I heard. I know this is not in our list of topics, but I read something this morning. And I thought it would be fun to just quickly talk about here on the show.
Of course.
And that is, there's a rumor going around that Sony is about to update the PS5 software and open up the SSD slot, enabling it. But part of this update is that they're going to have to increase the fan speed of your fans.
Yeah.
So your PS5 might get louder soon.
Yeah.
Because one of the things with this type of RAM that they're using for the SSD, it's so hot, it's so fast, which is great, but it runs super hot. And as it stands right now, one of the fan units is on the actual SSD right now. Because if you take apart your PS5, not that I've taken it apart, but if you take the panels off, you'll see two big fans, right? One on one side, one on the other. Under one of them is the fan directly pulling heat off of the SSD. But with the expansion slot, apparently it's a metal door, but it's not got a fan over it. So the metal will dissipate a bunch of heat. Obviously, it will pull it off the SSD, but it's still going to get to be a hot boy. So expect your super quiet PS5 to potentially get a little bit louder.
Yep.
So,
and it sounds like this isn't going to happen until the summertime, but this gives them a lot of time to optimize things before it goes to market, because that's essentially was one of the, I'm not going to say a selling point of the PS5, but it's something that consumers got wind of and really appreciated upon release.
What's that?
The fan speed, or like the fan sound.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been awesome for me. The only big knock is that you can't move the PS5 files. It's delete, or you can't move them to an external hard drive. You can only move PS4 games. So it gets a little bit confusing, and I feel bad for anybody playing Call of Duty on the PS5.
Yeah.
Like, what's that thing? I think that tubby bugger is over 400 gigs now.
Yep.
600.
The full game. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get 667 gigabytes free on your SSD as it stands, and the full game is 400 gig. Oh man, yep. That's insane. I had to take that crap off my PS4 because it was ballooning up beyond 100 gigabytes.
Yeah. See, the issue there is kind of two-pronged, right? Because these games are huge. They're going to get bigger. But also, people want the fast loading times. So, you're going to have to kind of, what do you want, right? You can't, it's one of those cases of you can't have your cake and eat it too. So, what can they do? I wish that Sony would be a little harder on some of their publishers or their game publishers, because it kind of brings a bad name to Sony at the end of the day. Sony gets the blame, not so much Activision or whomever is making the game, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, I definitely know to place my rage at Activision, but most people don't. And it's been a fun experience these past couple weeks playing around with the PS5. and I actually finished Dirt 5 this week. And I've been playing a little bit of that Outriders demo. And yeah, there's some interesting games coming up, but I feel like I've explored the entire PS5 catalog.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm like, all right, stop buying racing games, stop buying this. Like, there has to be something that comes along that's going to be actually next gen instead of just, Godfall is a really weird game because it looks fantastic, but it plays like a little bit like garbage.
Yeah.
Hot garbage. But there is a good story in there. I'm just really starting to unlock that game. And I've been playing it for a couple weeks now. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting because I like playing around with those PS5 titles because of that load speed. Just to see what things are going to be like.
Yep.
So, yeah, Dirt 5 probably had more loading than I thought it would have. But it was a fun game. I enjoy the racing arcade simulators.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my distraction of the week.
Sounds about right. So I guess now that we're talking video games, we might as well keep going, keep talking about video games. And now we're going to be talking about Nintendo and kind of Nintendo in the marketplace, because Nintendo's always kind of been like the game changer. Their systems aren't mainstream in the sense of, they're not Sony, they're not Microsoft, but they're the OGs. And if there's anything that Nintendo has done right, is introducing new ways of playing video games, new styles, new, just overall experiences.
They're trendsetters.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. They're trendsetters. Look at the Wii. When the Wii came out back in 2008, 2007, whenever it was, it was huge. The fact that, hey, you have these controllers in your hand. It's more interactive, things like that. That made things hard for publishers, but I feel like it was the decision at that point for Nintendo to kind of say, look, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to be different from everyone else, and you're going to like us because we are Nintendo, as opposed to, we have the latest Call of Duty, we have the latest FIFA, we have the latest whatever port. It's different.
They never got into the arms race. That's what I always liked about Nintendo. They just stayed pure to the messaging of, we're making games for gamers, like for kids, for adults, whatever, but we're doing games because we like doing games. We're not going to do games, and they're successful because of that. I don't think that they really sit back and think, oh, let's get the fastest machine in production out there and things like that. They're making choices to make gaming portable, accessible, things like that. And that's different, right? And they go on different release schedules.
Yep. And for the most part, there's one thing that Nintendo does right, which for me is the biggest thing that Nintendo does. And that is how often I only know one game in all of Switch's existence that was broken upon release. And it was a port from next-gen systems. That was WWE 2K18 or 19. I forget which one. Doesn't matter. But that game was unusable. But outside of that game, especially Nintendo games, you know that they're going to run perfectly. You know that there's going to be little to no issues with them. You never hear of the outcry that we get with other publishers. So, that's one thing that Nintendo for sure has up on everyone else, in my opinion, is that you're going to get quality with the software as well.
Yeah, 100%. And the experience, right? Like, when I sit down and play my Animal Crossing, which, by the way, this week, there's a whole huge Mario crossover happening. So I'm building a Mario room in my house right now. But when I'm playing that, I'm not looking for the highest fidelity graphics or anything like that. It's gameplay. It's fun. It's, when I put in Zelda, I'm playing, again, I don't care that it's not in 4K. I don't care about any of that stuff because it's simply astounding to me the way the grass moves and the way the environment, the world building that they're able to do. that's different than almost every other game out there. And that's what I really respect about Nintendo, is that they have that brand. They have that feeling. When I put on Mario Kart, you're instantly going to have fun because it's Mario Kart. Like, there's no debating. And you can buy with that confidence. And I think that's your point, is that you can sit there and you can go to the store and say, hey, look, I know it's not going to go on sale because Nintendo almost never have sales. I know it's all these X reasons, which maybe I weigh in on other video games or other titles where I have to evaluate my risk. But with Nintendo, it's like, I know I'm going to have fun. That's the thing, right? If I buy stupid Mario Golf, it's going to be a fun golf game, even if I hate golf.
Yep.
Like, that's the way it is.
Here's the thing. You go to a party, people aren't going to, unless it's a bunch of dudes and you're going to be playing video games. You go to a party, you're not going to see Call of Duty being played. You're not going to see FIFA being played. You're not going to see, Resident Evil remakes being played. But you will see people whip out a Switch, take out the controllers, start playing Mario Party or Mario Kart or something like that. So it's the ultimate kind of party system because they're easy games to play. They have pretty rudimentary controls. So it's the ultimate party system and the system that you can kind of do as a group, regardless of age, regardless of how often you game. And as you just said, you're going to have a lot of fun doing so. So, Nintendo's kind of that system. So it's always been different in that sense. And I found that, especially ever since Wii and Wii U and now Switch, they've kind of really positioned themselves as that other system. You're always going to have a Nintendo and something else. That's what I'm noticing. Not everyone, a lot of people have Nintendos. If we ran down the sales numbers, Nintendo is just killing it in terms of sales. It's unreal how good sales are for Nintendo, thanks to like Pokemon, Animal Crossing, and etc. And Zelda's always there, but Nintendo is just Nintendo. So Bloomberg, which is a very, very, very good source, they are starting to have more reports on what this Nintendo Switch 2 is supposed to be. So the big rumor, and all of this is rumor right now, but with it being Bloomberg, I felt like it was credible enough for us to finally talk about it. So it's expected to launch sometime in 2021, and it's going to have a lot of the bells and whistles that people have been clamoring for since the original release in 2017 of the Switch. So the not official announced Nintendo console was rumored to have a 7-inch OLED screen from Samsung. It's also supposed to be native 4K. It's also supposed to have a faster refresh rate than the standard 60 hertz. So, it's starting to sound really pretty damn good in that sense. So, bigger display, better screen, faster insides. What more can you ask for?
It's funny because my rudimentary roundup, I thought somebody had reported that it's only going to be able to do 4K while it's in the cradle. And while it's out in the wild, the OLED screen is only capable of 720. But it is OLED and it is slightly bigger. But regardless, no matter what, this thing is going to be able to, because I can't imagine putting 4K on a 7-inch screen. It would probably look amazing, but you'd probably be hard pressed to identify that.
Yeah.
But it's gonna get into that hardware game that everybody's been wanting, and that is those max resolutions for TV, right? And I know that we've seen other rumors about them telling all their developers to have 4K versions of their stuff ready to go. Things like that. So it's good to see Nintendo are releasing another product that kind of continues on their philosophy that we were talking about, with not necessarily killing a product line, not necessarily competing with other people, but being able to complement things and being able to get a lot of good gaming out there, right? Because kids love the Nintendo Wii, parents do. Like, I know, just watching my niece and her boyfriend, he likes to play Xbox. Guess what? She wants to play a game too. So she bought a Nintendo Switch Lite.
Yep.
And started playing Animal Crossing. So it was just it makes gaming accessible, and that's one of the things I love about Nintendo. Is just you can have fun with it. It's a good time. But
Yeah.
it'd be cool. I wouldn't mind seeing Animal Crossing in 4K.
Jesus Christ. There's a lot of talk also because a lot of people have been asking kind of, when is Breath of the Wild 2 going to come out? What's going on with that open world Pokemon game, or Pokemon Breath of the Wild as I like to call it, because it's supposed to, it draws all the comparisons to it. And there's a lot of speculation now that, they've been working closely with Nintendo to be optimized for that new hardware.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me.
Makes sense.
So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's going to be good times for me, for sure. I'm really looking forward to it. And again, it keeps the Nintendo fresh. It keeps the Nintendo good. It, will for sure, people are going to be rebuying the Nintendo. In fact, I can see a lot of people who bought the Nintendo Switch Lite buying this one because they really enjoyed the Switch. I will probably upgrade to this because I have nothing better to do in my life nowadays.
Yeah, I could definitely see a lot of Lite users going to this as well, or even going to the regular Switch. Nothing against the Lite. I think it fills a void in the little portable market. The Switch is definitely, the hybrid capacity of this thing or capability is definitely great, but I wouldn't want to play on a Lite just because a smaller screen. It's hard enough to see things as it is for me sometimes. But B, no TV out.
Yeah,
that's the big feature for me. I really enjoy plastering a game up on the screen. It doesn't, I even have Doom for the Switch just because I wanted to see what Bethesda had to do in order to make it run on the Switch compared to, something killer. It's interesting. Still a very good game. Like you say, it's not broken. It works. They just cut down on the craziness of the mobs and things like that, so the processor could handle it better. Still a great game. Good environments.
Yep, exactly.
If you didn't play the other game on the more horsepower systems, you wouldn't know that there was any compromise. You'd have a great time playing it.
Yep, exactly. So I think that wraps up the Nintendo talk. Do you have any final thoughts before we move on?
Go Sega.
Man, I love Sega. It's just too bad that, Dreamcast, in my opinion, was too far ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was. That I remember at the time thinking about, because it was out and the PlayStation was just coming out and Nintendo was doing its thing with cartridges and whatnot. And I remember thinking, that Dreamcast, I don't know. I really don't know. Sega's just really lost their way over the past couple of years. And then I went and I saw a friend with it, and I was so blown away by it. I was just like, oh man, the shit is happening on this. And then that was when it was in decline. Like, I was late to that party, so I never got on the bandwagon. But holy cow, was the graphics and the animations and whatnot that thing was capable of was light years ahead of anything else that was in the marketplace.
And they had online games. Like, they had Phantasy Star Online, and it was amazing to play. Like, I gave up my N64 to get a Dreamcast. Juan, my brother, and I, we sold our N64, sold all the games, because we're jumping on this ship. So 9/9/99, September 9th, 1999, I went to the store to pick up our pre-ordered Sega Dreamcast, and I remember it was fantastic. The first two games we got were Soul Calibur and the Sonic game, Sonic Adventure.
Man, Soul
Calibur, and then eventually we got Jet Set Radio, Space Channel 5. It was such a good system, way ahead of its time, and I don't care what anyone says. Capcom versus Marvel was fantastic on that system.
Yeah.
It was such a good system.
It's so funny because this week on Stadia, we got Pixel Junk Raiders, which is like the spiritual evolution of Jet Set Radio. It's funny that you brought that up so haphazardly because we were talking about that and I forgot to mention it off the top. But yeah, Stadia had a strong week in game releases, just while we're still in video game land. So good on them, because every time you start to believe the doom and gloom that Stadia is dead because all the haters, like we talked about last week, they come out with these gems, man, each month. So good on them. I think it was like 4 games this week that came out, 4 or 6 or something. So
yeah, like Stadia is gonna be doing their thing. Like I don't see them going huge just yet. I see them eventually. So here's my prediction, my bold prediction about what the future of Stadia holds. I think that eventually they're going to sell themselves to Microsoft or Sony for the infrastructure. What Stadia has done is the future. That is the future of gaming. Whether it be, if the option of owning a game hardware also opens it up to the cloud. So as you're downloading a game, you'll be able to play the cloud version of the game. And I know that EA is going to be testing this very soon. So I can see the cloud being, hand in hand with traditional gaming. I can see, there's going to be a lot of back and forth, but the cloud infrastructure that Google has introduced seems to be getting a lot more mainstream attention than people think. It seems to be getting a lot of attention to publishers, and as publishers are studying the APIs and looking at that technology, they're obviously talking to Sony and Microsoft to see what is available for them. So I can see Stadia kind of being like Sega in the sense of, revolutionizing the game, changing things up, but never getting that like huge market that Microsoft and Sony has. I just think that there's, we live in a world where there can only be two. It has to be person A versus person B. Let's look at even the mobile phone world. It was always BlackBerry versus iOS. Then when Android became big, BlackBerry was kind of tossed aside. Beta versus VHS. There can only be two. It's 1 versus 2. So I kind of see that with the video game world. And then again, kind of tying this back to the conversation we were just having about Nintendo. Nintendo is kind of like the cousin that everyone likes. No one hates Nintendo. No one's going to shit on Nintendo. But, they're never going to be, either one or two. They're that third option that everybody has.
Yeah, they're banging on their own drum. They don't care about the rat race.
Yep.
They're the hippie cousin that comes and sleeps on your couch.
Exactly. The fun uncle that shows up, drinks your beer, and leaves in the morning. Wait, that's me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's you too.
Wow, how'd you get in my head?
All right, so as we're talking about the cloud and cloud computing, the cloud seems to be kind of like one of those major buzzwords that we're seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of traditional software vendors move to the cloud. Even the company that I work for, we are now offering our solution on the cloud, working with cloud offerings, because IT departments, as they offshore IT departments, it's a huge investment for a company to host the infrastructure in-house. So having a SaaS or a dedicated SaaS or some form of SaaS solution is turning into the future. So essentially that takes the onus away from the customer of maintaining and running and upgrading the system to the actual provider. In the mobile world, we're seeing a lot of apps use cloud solutions for their database because, maintaining a database is super expensive. So rather than hosting a server farm, they're going to use a pre-existing cloud infrastructure like Amazon Web Services, like Microsoft Azure, etc., etc., etc. There's one thing though. Because this is all new, people are still learning and mistakes can be made. So what we're seeing is a bunch of simple setup errors causing major source of exposures. And that's a lot of backends. So it's essentially what people are doing is, and by people I mean companies who have their apps in the cloud, is, they're going on vacation, they're locking all the doors, but they forget to lock a side window. So, a lot of people now are and who like to do nefarious things seem to be a step ahead of where security is. So they, walk around the perimeter of the house and they find that half open window and they'll open that bad boy up. So there's a lot of issues happening right now with apps and info being stolen. Zimperium ran automated analysis on more than 1.3 million Android and iOS apps to detect common cloud misconfigurations that expose data. The researchers found almost 84,000 Android apps and nearly 47,000 iOS apps using public cloud services like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and there seem to be about 14% of those have issues with their configuration, which leaves data exposed. So we're looking at about 11,800 Android apps and 6,600 iOS apps. And the information that seems to be exposed is users' personal information like passwords, medical information, etc. This isn't small. This is fucking huge.
Yeah. It's nothing like, because the thing is that there's no way for the customer to really identify the validity of apps as well, right? Because
exactly.
There are times when with certain apps where if I feel I don't trust the app or the company enough, like I just don't know enough about them, I'm cease and desist right there. I'm like, I'm not giving them this information. I'm sorry, but I don't know where it's going. That's why I'm a little bit happier when I see apps work with other apps, i.e., if you go in and you order something, it says, instead of you filling out your credit card information on their site, it's like, we can use Google Pay. You know what I mean? Like you can do the transaction through Google on a separate component, not in the app. You're not giving over your personal information in the app per se. Now, I know there's probably all kinds of minefields in there too, but I'm just saying, like, it's hard for the consumers to know how great of a program like app security has.
Yep.
Because there's no validation for that other than it's protected on the Play Store or something like that, right? But you don't know what their backends are like.
Yeah, just because the app works doesn't mean that the backend isn't exposed to major threats.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no, rules that forces app developers to have penetration tests and things like that. From a enterprise world point of view, when it's B2B, business to business transactions, you get asked that all the time. I have to always give reports to my customers on our penetration tests.
Yeah.
So essentially that means, a third-party vendor is going to try to access all the windows, all the doors into your house, and you get a report, and, it's either you got to fix these things or, tough luck. So there's all these third-party vendors, but a lot of app makers, they don't have the money for this. They don't have the resources for this. But I kind of feel like we're at a point now where there needs to be something put in place because, having people's information just easily stored like this, is a major issue. Like, I haven't spoken about this with you in about 10 years. But look at all the issues we used to have with the Red Patch Boys website.
Oh, God, yeah.
And all of the issues had nothing to do with our website. It was our provider for the longest time.
Yeah, or the software and the software fixes, right? Because there would be so many exploits on the database. Like it was just unbelievable. And so we would always be in a state of, is there a new fix for this? If you get to the new fix, you apply it, it's probably going to open up 3 or 4 more things that are going to break. Right. So you're constantly putting out fires from that ownership side of, you're providing the service and people are just complaining, hey, my DMs don't work now. And this is happening. I can't follow this post anymore. It was a bit chaotic. for that. And I can only imagine it's no secret. We both work in IT. And yeah, everything that you're saying, you're right. I've been quietly, I don't really have direct input at my work, which is fine, about these kind of decisions. But I've just been in the back of my mind thinking, I hope everybody's investigating the validity or the safety of all this, because it is a big shift moving all of this information into a cloud, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like everybody's moving away from having their own data centers. They're moving into distributed, like you say, going to co-locations and things like this, or cloud solutions. There's all kinds of ways to do this. And enterprises are doing it on a multi-channel level too. They're backing up with a fallback that does something differently, but they're wanting to get out of the data center business. And yeah, that's the trend in IT. And I just hope that, just like anything, when you start doing something, you find out quickly where the falling down points are.
Yep.
And then it's no surprise in probably 10 years, we'll be back to data center solutions and owning all of our stuff on site again. Like,
it's funny that you say that.
It's just amazing.
I always say that about like IT world. There's these trends, where everything goes back in full circle. And I always make the joke that IT people, this is the way that they keep themselves employed. But it's, IT people aren't the ones making the full decision. It's C-levels who may or may not understand what the implications are. But you're right. Right now, it's too expensive to host. So we're going to go to the cloud. We're going to have these co-locations of hosting services. And then once a lot of issues open up there and C-levels think that they understand what's going on there, they're like, no, I'm going to be smart. Let's own our stuff. So, there seems to be like this go around that's going to be happening every 10 to 15 years. Yep.
It's so cyclical. Like that's the one thing I've noticed in my 20 plus years in IT is I've seen the trends go round and round. And yeah, it just comes back to somebody's going to say, well, it would be really great if we just had it all in-house.
Yep. Look, I've been working professionally since 2005, so I'm nearing the 20 years, and I've seen a few cycles go around. So it's kind of funny to see kind of, all of this happen. So why are we talking about this? Why does it matter to our listeners? When you download an app, just do a little research on the app that you're going to download. See how, if there's any reports out, because sometimes these app developers will make their reports public. Take a look at the reviews. Make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, because, you're putting your full trust into these apps. Another thing, sometimes you may want to not use your main email account. You may want to change up your passwords. There's a lot of things that you can do to protect yourself if you absolutely need that app, but you aren't sure. There's so much that you can do. There's a lot of research that you should do before downloading apps or having a third-party app connect to an existing app. That's why the apps that scare me the most are the ones with single sign-on with Facebook and things like that, because you don't know what these third-party apps are doing. And we don't know exactly what information they're getting access to. And it's not so much the info, it's where this info is being stored at that other location. So it's for me, it's kind of like very scary. But yeah, so, you just might want to do more research, switch things around, because, the last thing I want to hear is going on Facebook and seeing more of my friends kind of getting duped, which I'm noticing that, it seems to be, there seems to be a rise of that. I've seen people kind of have their Google accounts being compromised over the past few weeks.
I've seen mine, like people have tried to go at it, but I did a major overhaul of a lot of my passwords and things like that over the past few months, just because I've noticed that it's on the rise. I've also noticed that there's a heck of a lot more phone scams going on and phone phishing, because it's obviously tax season. And it seems like there are days where my phone gets blitzed like 15 times a day with CRA scams, and the automated voice and all that crap. So, it's garbage. But man, there's got to be people falling for it because they're happening so much.
Yeah,
There's
I was
so much
watching a
numbers
report.
duping and
Yeah, I was watching a report that the number of people falling for these scams has skyrocketed with COVID. Now that everyone's home, there's a lot more danger out there as well because, people feel like they're like, that everything's the Wild West right now in terms of security, in terms of phishing and things like that. So, again, just be careful, be mindful. The government will never call you. A company will never ask you to transfer Bitcoin. Never ask you for your password. Always check the email of the sender. There's so many ways that you can kind of protect yourself, and I hope that, before you do that click, always double check, always make sure, and before you download an app, maybe do a little extra research, maybe have different logins and different email, different passwords. Two-factor authentication is what I'm using everywhere.
Yep.
But I'm super careful because if something happens to my phone, I'm effed. But, for me, it's just a peace of mind.
It's so funny though. It's like how many times. Well, I can remember like some of the phishing stuff that would go on. And it would be like, well, they contacted you, and then it's the Bitcoin thing, and they're like, well, we have pictures of you looking at stuff on the internet, and your cam was on, and all this. And they got you because they've found like this really old password that you used to have.
Yep.
So you actually do get scared, and you're like, screw this! Like I don't even do that on that device or anything. Like I'm just this is like
device.
on that device. Like I am a human being, but it's just so funny, right? Because I'm like, oh man, this has got to be terrifying if you don't have any critical thought. Like this is offsetting just because it's so manipulative and it's so convincing and it's so vague, right? It's just all these inferences. Like we know what you did last summer.
I know.
Oh man,
I'm not worried about myself, but this is where I hate the fact that my parents use apps and tablets, and my dad uses a computer, and like I don't know, he's done stuff. Luckily he's never like written off his RSPs or anything stupid like that. But I'm always afraid of what they're gonna click, what they're gonna call us for, And I told him, look, if someone asks you for anything, let me see it before you respond.
Yeah, well, how do you think I felt when my 82-year-old dad says that he talked to the people at Google and Facebook and they were going to fix the ads on his machine? I'm like, who did you talk to?
Exactly.
Where was this conversation? And then I went in and surveyed it, and I'm like, oh, okay. So they gave him an automated message that they'd look into it. And he interpreted that whole exchange like a conversation. He told it to me that way. And I'm like, oh, man, I put a little bit of shit in my pants that day.
But doesn't that go to show you how advanced chatbots are turning into? Like where people are legitimately thinking that they're talking to someone on the other end.
Yeah. Well, especially the elderly and whatnot, because they don't understand. They don't even have the concept. I always find a bot and I'm like, oh, can I break it? It's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, it is.
So.
And that's something that I work with every day. It's like the companies that do the documentation and set up the databases and stuff like that. And they use our database and stuff like that for info that gets fed into the chatbot. So they're just becoming incredibly, like that's essentially your first line of support now. You're not even going to get a human. You're going to get, the knowledge base articles into a robot type thing.
Yeah. Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again?
Yeah. Exactly. All right, so that is privacy, and of course, just be mindful, please. All right, so we're going to be talking about AT&T, and they seem to have done a bit of a no-no in terms of their stocks. The reason why we talk about AT&T is because it is the parent company of Warner Brothers, HBO, DC Comics. We talk about them, we drag them through the mud, so let's continue dragging them through the mud. Basically, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, is suing AT&T because they've provided non-public information to 20 different analyst firms so they would lower revenue estimates ahead of earnings. What does that mean?
Wow.
Yeah. This is, let's get through this, but this is a major accusation. And here we have a bunch of bastards getting pissed off at, Joe Blow on Reddit because they may have,
Yeah.
fudged the
That's what I'm
market for
saying.
them. So essentially, AT&T or any enterprise, any corporation, they have to give their estimates in terms of what their outlook is for the next quarter or two or whatever, however many, whatever. They have to give their outlook. And then the analysts take this outlook and they kind of gauge what your price is going to be, based on your earnings. So if a company has lower expectations and they surpass those expectations, well, your stock is going to go skyrocketing. It's going to go up. It's going to bode well for the company. Now, this is where BlackBerry had a lot of issues. The expectations were always high. So when we met or even surpassed those expectations, the analysts were upset because it didn't match what they expected would be the numbers that they would reach. So everything kept blowing up in the downward direction. So this is all very important because this kind of gauges the markets. This is how companies and the stock market at the most basic level work. So you have AT&T kind of, number one, doing insider trading, sending info, undisclosed, unpublished, undeclared information to analysts and firms so that these analysts would lower the numbers for AT&T's outlook. And then when AT&T comes out at the end of the quarter and in their earnings call come out with the real numbers, they are much higher, which means that the company value and the stocks and personal stocks will increase. How is this not front page news? How is this not absolute federal charges?
Yeah, like this is the stuff that when you think about the stonks, like right away, we're going to have federal investigation. We're going to open up all kinds of investigation into the wrongdoing that's occurred because these Redditors, they put up the memes and they get the money and we don't understand it and it's manipulation. And then, the big companies, the corporations are blatantly doing this. Potentially, it has to be proven. It's an allegation that they're pursuing, but obviously they feel there's merit to it. So it begs the question, if it's happening, like this needs to be investigated, similar to the stuff that went on with Enron, similar to all of that kind of stuff. When you get companies at this scale doing that, that is like, that's the anti-monopoly argument right there. Like that is feeding that beast, and it's, potentially ruining it for other big tech corporations like the Googles and the Microsofts and the Facebooks and things like that, because it's anti-competitive behavior. It's greed, pure and simple.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that this stuff is allowed to happen, and it's just a simple slap in the wrist if they get found guilty.
That's the thing that pisses me off the most in reading about all this stuff. It's even with the COVID kind of stuff, right? Like, how is it that you can sit there, and in Canada we have probably the strictest entrance into a country that you can have worldwide. Still not great, but you have to quarantine for at least 3 days and possibly for 2 weeks at a hotel when you get off a plane landing here, where there's only 4 ports of entry, all this stuff that's going on, right? But get this, if you don't do it, it's a $750 fine. So what's the incentive? Like, the fines have to match the punishment. And it's the same thing with these SEC fines and all that, where they're sitting there and they're going, well, that's a $5,000 fine. Yeah, and they made $20 billion out the door on this. Whatever it is, it's like $5,000. Who gives a shit?
Exactly.
It's just like the NHL taxing Ovechkin all this money. It's like a percentage of his pay. It doesn't matter anymore. You're going for principle. Well, principle's dead because politics have killed it. There are no ethics or principle anymore in this world. It's just all frickin' bullshit and token payments now.
Yep, exactly.
That's my rant.
I love it. I love the fact that this is your week to rant.
Yeah. I was just like, I'll hold my beer.
So that's something that's happening. We're gonna keep following this story because to me it's super interesting, and I kind of want to see where this goes because this could affect things that we talk about because you never know what can happen with these types of court rulings. So
look at that list, right? HBO, DC, Warner Brothers, like the stuff that this touches is way more than telecommunications or anything like that.
Yep, exactly. All right, so the last thing on our list is California giving the okay for Disneyland and other theme parks and stadiums to reopen April 1st with restrictions, as Phil seems super disappointed. We're going to focus on California because, there's other things happening right now that just completely
don't mention Texas.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said that. So essentially, Disneyland, Universal Studios, and other theme parks and sports stadiums in California can reopen beginning April 1st. There will be some caveats. The health department is requiring significantly reduced capacity, mandatory masking, and other public health precautions due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. So the number of people and the capacity percentage will be based off of open number of cases. So the more cases there are in the public, the less people are going to be allowed in these venues. And it's going to be, full-on masks and other health precautions that will be put in place. California has 4 tiers to their COVID-19 protocols. They're colored, and every tier kind of has if California is in this tier, this is the percentage of capacity that you can have. So we'll see what happens, but California is really starting the opening, which, whether it's right or wrong, I don't want to get into that discussion, but we are seeing things that we talk about kind of open up a little more because, there's this touches us directly here on this show because now we're going to be seeing more production. There was a lot of production halts in California. Disney is making money again. We're going to see sports stadiums. MLB has already announced that the 5 California teams will have fans in attendance, which means that other things will be able to happen in California, like concerts, etc., etc., etc.
Interesting. I know that California, a lot of that state is very warm, open air. It's that time of year where we're starting, like we talked about off the top, it's warming up. And that's bad for coronavirus, as we saw when we saw it, the numbers lower last summer during that. So I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, it's a public travesty or anything. And these companies do need to make money, and they do have these big properties and stadiums and products to get out there. And the longer we stay in lockdown, for sure, the more in danger it is. But it is public health, right? And that's as long as people are being safe. I can see that, the issues that I have with what you read there was mostly around, the higher the case public thing, the less people will have in the theme parks. Will restrict that, and everybody has to wear masks. Well, I can tell you right now, COVID is not going to respect that there's less people or more people. And I can also tell you right now, when you put little kids and families in a theme park, there's going to be more times when that mask is coming off to eat the fucking ice cream, to have the hot dog, or because the kid threw up and the mask flew off on the ride. There are going to be so many cases of non-mask compliance that will potentially, I guess, enable the spread. And it's poised to be an absolute nightmare summer if these vaccines don't get in arms and, all the stuff that we're seeing in the world and these variants. And I'm like, but I understand it though. Yeah. I get it. I don't understand in Ontario why we let big box stores open and we close down smaller shops.
Yeah. There's
when the smaller shops are probably safer.
And this is the thing that gets to me is that, these stupid rules that very uninformed governments are placing on us. For example, like you just said, the big box stores being allowed to open rather than small businesses. It hurts small businesses a lot more. Obviously, we're seeing the actual public being hurt more, which leaves us a bitter taste in people's mouths. But then these people turn around and become COVID deniers just because your government is stupid.
Yeah.
Just because your government doesn't know what they're doing and handling this horribly doesn't mean that this is not a real threat. I'm seeing this correlation between anger at the government, and your belief on what's actually happening out there, and they seem to be inversely proportionate because, as your anger raises, it's like, fuck COVID. COVID's not even real. That's not the case. The reality is that COVID is very real. The danger is not so much on the human. It is hospital capacity, the frontline workers, their mental state, etc., etc., etc. That's the real danger here. We're also seeing an increase of healthcare costs. We're also seeing an increase of pollution because of the one-time use masks and other stuff like that. So there's a lot more to consider than just, I'm infected, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
There's more to that, and there's more to the reasons why we have lockdowns and restrictions. But because governments are being utterly irresponsible, utterly stupid, people are going and jumping on the denying bandwagon.
Yeah, and that gives it air, right? And that's the biggest thing that I think, even with the conspiracy groups and everything like that, that's the thing that I'm scared of the most for people, is that exactly you're right. You're mad at the government for their asinine idea or implementation of some kind of rule that seems to reinforce that they like big corporations and they're not really in it for the little guy. And then it becomes a full-on political battle for people. Then they're in the streets, like, fighting, like literally fighting people and insulting people and acting way out of character for what should be allowed in our society, where you're just being downright disrespectful to somebody based off of, what's a medical issue is now becoming a political issue. And my goodness, have we seen that a lot in the States too? It's happening up here. It's just really sad to see. We all want to be safe. We all want to be at work. We all want this to be over. But the more that we dance around being responsible, and the more we let our leaders do this type of garbage with their rules, then the longer this is going to be around. I'm so fearful about a lot of that, but hey, I am excited about the idea that, like you were saying, there's more production companies going to be getting more TV and movies onto the screens for us, and yeah, it directly hits us for content. That's for sure.
That's the unfortunate part. As long as or fortunate, depends how you want to look at it. If the production halts and shit keeps hitting the fan, we have something juicy to talk about. If everything goes back to normal, it's regular content for us. So it's kind of weird how that works in our favor, regardless of what is going on. But we'll see what happens there. I did mention earlier that I wanted to kind of talk about foreign hacking. So before we go, we're just going to quickly touch on that. And there's a lot more reports about, the astronomical number of hacking that China and Russia is doing. And to the point where government agencies are saying it's going to take years to unpack and see the damage and info that they've actually stolen. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of privacy and things like that. I think that, another thing that people need to do, on top of everything that I already talked about, is always give yourself a good credit report. Always check that. It costs $30 Canadian from Equifax or the other company who does it. Look into it, see what your report says, see if there's anything weird. I'm, right now fighting something that I saw years ago was reported, and it actually hurt my credit a little bit. It's nothing major, but, it's something that if I didn't see, it would obviously hurt me, when I need something. So, Yeah,
Right.
so that's where we're at. Like, you have to be very careful, cautious, and this is just something that we're gonna have to deal with at this point. It's the Russian and the Chinese hacking has stretched like years, and it's become very evident that we can't keep up. Government agencies are obviously trying to stay ahead of things, but like I mentioned earlier, hackers and people who want to do something nefarious are always a step ahead.
Yeah, they define the race and we react to it, right?
Yep.
It's just like with antivirus software and things like that. They only know to put an antivirus in there if they know what the virus is. So always trailing it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
these entities are very creative at getting ahead of things, of imagining, just look at that whole solar winds exposition that went on. That was just crazy, right?
Yeah, that's what triggered kind of this news spot. Was that solar winds stuff. But yeah, it's again, there's a lot of things that you probably should do, especially now as the IoT is taking over, the Internet of Things, everything is connected, your car is connected, your fridge is connected, everything is connected, smart TVs, and you're connecting all your accounts. It's just something that you really need to stay on top of, in my opinion.
Yeah, and semiconductors.
Yep. And semiconductors. Everything's got a semiconductor. We have semiconductors soon. We're going to be bionic soon.
Yeah.
So
I have a kimchi semiconductor.
Oh, man.
Think about that.
I know, right?
I can process cabbage semi-well.
Oh, man. We need Tyler back to keep us in check.
I know, right? Otherwise, it's all dick and fart jokes.
So true. It's so fucking true. It's so funny. But yeah, so hopefully we'll have Tyler back in the next couple of weeks. He's still busy. He's still doing his thing. But he does assure Phil that will be back once things settle down. So Tyler will be back. Yeah. So we'll have him soon. We'll be able to,
I even think he was all set to come on this episode, but he was having some technical issues, so he's got to work through that. That's very important, but I know I have full confidence. And yeah, it'd be good to have him back. Miss the boy.
Exactly. It's always fun talking and chatting stuff with him. And we have a lot of ideas on specials that we want to do, but I want him to be a part of them because he will bring some great views and great info to these specials. So hopefully we can get Tyler back soon. So without further ado, if you like, if you hate, if whatever, there's many ways that you can get a hold of us. Phil, can you tell our awesome listeners how and where they can find us?
If you want to catch up with us, you know what? We're all over the internet. You can hit us at www.itscanonpodcast.com. You can track us down on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at It's Canon Podcast. You can email us at show@itscanonpodcast.com. And you can basically find our show on pretty much anything, anywhere that you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere. You're gonna be seeing the It's Canon Podcast, and be sure to subscribe so you get notified whenever we drop a crazy episode, and leave a rate and review if possible. Thanks very much for giving us your ears for the week.
Yep.
And we'll see you, I guess, later on this week when we talk WandaVision, Boris.
Exactly. So thank you, everyone, for the listen, for the subscribe, for the review, for letting us know what you think of the show. It really does mean a lot to me, because as much as I say this show is geek therapy for Phil, myself, for Tyler, we put the show on for entertainment reasons for you. So this week, we will have our WandaVision recap analysis review with Brad and Lisa. That's going to be out on Wednesday. We're recording Tuesday night, so I have some work to do, a show to prepare, and then next week we'll be back with our news episode. So until then, we are the It's Canon Podcast, the podcast that talks about all things video games, all things comic books, all things movies, all things toys, all things Lego, all things Muppets, all things privacy, all things tech, all things everything. And Phil, do you know what the best part of it all is?
I'm pretty sure it's all in Canon, but I'm not 100% positive.
That's right. It's all in Canon because it's the It's Canon podcast, your go-to place for all pop culture. He's Phil. I'm Boris. Goodbye. All right. Done.